how do you envisage the ideal improved education system to produce young people who will bring progress rather than more cogs for the existing machine? There's a question for you.
Yeah, let me say something about the 95 Theses and the 1517 reference. We sort of had this idea that this was 2 years ago in 2017, but still very, very much correct that the way to think of the universities today is that they are as corrupt as the Roman Catholic Church was 500 years ago, and they are basically it is you have sort of this the system of indulgences that takes the form of runaway tuitions. You have this priestly or professorial class that is pretty lazy and doesn't do very much work. You have this theory of salvation, where salvation consists of getting a diploma, and if you do not get a college diploma, you are going to end up in a very bad place. And so there's a sort of a soteriological story as well. And I think that it's sort of a universalized, centralized, big story. It's a successor to the universal Catholic Church, is this universal university system. It's maybe this is an oxymoronic way to describe it, but I think you have to think of it as the atheist church with a capital A and a capital C. And that one of the things that I think I have no problems with the church, and I have some problems with atheism, but I think the atheist church is really simply too much, and we should be fighting the atheist church in all of its forms. And I think the 1517 analogy, again, I can't quite predict the future, but is that reform does not come from within. There's sort of all these attempts you do to reform these universities from within, and it is just feels like a fool's errand of sorts. I remember in 2007, over a decade ago, I had this idea that my big nonprofit philanthropy project was going to be to start a new university, and I had someone at my foundation spent a year and a half looking at all the universities that had been started in the U.S. in the preceding 100 years, from 1907 to 2007, and it was a sorry tale of donor intent betrayed and money wasted and things just not working at all. And there were a few tiny things that you could say sort of worked, but on the whole, it was just a sorry tale of failure. And the lesson I took from it was one of a little bit of humility, because one reaction is, well, people have failed at this for 100 years, and I'm going to do it better. And the lesson I took instead was maybe the system is actually unbelievably hard to reform on the inside. And like in 1517, the Reformation starts from the outside. And the alternative is not to create some new universal university system, some new template. It's for people to do different things. And the way we started was with this Thiel Fellows program. We try to convince 20 students a year to stop out of college and start companies. So it was not a plan, but it was going off the sort of ever narrower tracks that are working ever less well, and some generalization of that is what I think we all sense that we need. And a lot of it, the sort of one framework that I had for our program that might be a good framework for the post university thing is it was always there's a lot of stuff that one can still do in computers, and so we always thought a lot of it was about programming, and then to the extent we wanted a program for what we were doing, we thought what we needed to do was deprogramming. And so the label I thought for the internal label we had for the Thiel Fellowship was it was about programming and deprogramming, and we need to deprogram people from the cult of the atheist church.
What about online education? What is the promise of that? There are a lot of really significant initiatives which are actually having an impact. What do you think are the prospects really in using information technology to provide high entropy education?
Well, there's obviously a lot that one can do online in all of these forms. When I take my venture capitalist hat and look at these things as things to invest in, I always think it's very important to sort of break down a little bit the abstractions and to remember that education itself is always an abstraction. And if we make it a little bit less abstract, let me suggest there are 4 different things that education means in practice in our society. One thing is certainly the official meaning is that it's all about learning. It's about information. It's a positive sum game. It's about learning. But sort of four sort of variations of it is it's an investment in your future. So you go to college, it's sort of an investment into a better future. Second, it's a consumption decision. So it's like a 4-year party. And I used to think that it was sort of this bad quantum superposition of investment and consumption. It was sort of like people in the housing bubble bought a large house with a swimming pool, and it showed how frugal they were and how much they were saving for retirement. And it was we were sort of conflating investment and consumption, which is always a mistake. But I now think that it's the third and fourth one that are the more important. The third one is that it's an insurance product and that it's something you buy to avoid falling through the ever bigger cracks in our society. And you can pay, and they can charge more and more for you because people are getting more scared about some of the things that have gone wrong in this country. And the fourth one is it's a zero-sum tournament where you have to think of Harvard and Stanford and Caltech and the other elite universities as a sort of Studio 54 nightclub in which the value is not that you have this information and that it's actually the value comes from excluding people. And so, there's like a Harvard or a Stanford version of putting Harvard or Stanford classes online and letting people take them. And these universities have done it, and people can take those classes in many cases, but they don't get credit at Harvard or Stanford, and taking those classes does not lead to a Harvard or Stanford degree. And that tells you that a lot of the value of this very strange good that is called education comes not from the actual learning, but more from things like status, selection, exclusion, things of that sort. And I think that when we look at these different approaches, we have to try to disentangle what they're doing. So online education is great for learning, but unfortunately, learning has almost nothing to do with the so-called educational system.